Hello, and welcome to our EHS Today webinar, Employee Perceptions of Workplace Safety in 2025, sponsored by AlertMedia. I'm Adrienne Salco, Senior Editor at EHS Today. I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Katie Goen, who is Director of Content and Communications for AlertMedia.
Thank you so much, Adrienne, and hello, everyone. It's so great to see all of you today. I am here to moderate today's presentation on employee perceptions of workplace safety in 2025. And all of us at AlertMedia really look forward to this webinar every year because we get to give you all some insights into our 2025 employee safety report. So I think you're going to find this data just really helpful, useful, certainly, and possibly even surprising. And in addition to this data, we're going to go over some of the key takeaways and share strategies, right, for how you can use this data to improve things like employee engagement, inform some of your safety trainings, and enhance the overall safety culture at your organization. So we have a great presentation in store for you today. So I'm going to kick things introducing today's speakers. Our featured speaker today is Danielle Sherman. She is the founder and CEO of Search. Her team conducted this year's survey and analyzed the data to uncover insights that will help businesses improve their safety culture. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here chatting with everyone today about our latest survey and yielded a ton of fascinating insights, which we're going to dive into throughout the webinar. So thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I'd also like to introduce Peter Steinfeld, who is the Senior Vice President of Safety Solutions at AlertMedia. Peter's been in the emergency communications industry for more than 20 years, and he's really helped organizations of all sizes and all industries up-level their employee safety, business continuity, and emergency preparedness initiatives. He's also the host of the Employee Safety Podcast. Glad to have you here, Peter.
It's great to be here. Always enjoy this, and I'm looking forward to getting right into it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for taking the time to join us. I do want to just quickly go over some of the key research topics so you know what you can expect today. So we're going to cover what employees expect from their employers when it comes to workplace safety specifically, some identified gaps in emergency preparedness and employee readiness, employee perceptions of their employers' safety efforts, and then the impact that things like stress and employee well-being can have on workplace safety. And finally, we're going to tell you how to turn these insights into actionable takeaways for both your organization and your employees. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kick things over to Peter now. Peter, jump on in.
All right. Well, thanks, Katie. There is a lot to cover, so I am going to jump right in. So AlertMedia's 2025 Employee Safety Report surveyed thousands of global employees to understand their perceptions of safety, to arm employers with better insights into how they can deliver on employees' safety expectations. It's really important to understand how employees' safety expectations evolve and change over the years based on factors like intensifying weather and natural disasters or economic uncertainty, maybe global conflicts, and even shifts in employees' personal stress and well-being. So that's why AlertMedia releases this report annually, so we can help you understand these trends and the nuances behind them over time. When leaders address employee concerns and then basically foster a culture of safety built on things like trust, communication, and employee support, it really benefits both the employees and the organizations, just overall creating a more resilient, productive, and empowered workforce. So with that said, Danielle, over to you to talk about the safety survey methodology.
All right. Thanks, Peter. So we reached a sample of 2,000 US employees and 1,000 employees in the UK. Important to note that all of our respondents were employed full-time. We included a broad cross-section of employees, so it includes both managers and non-managers alike. The sample spanned the entirety of each geographical area, ensuring that we were really representative of different geography, industry, as well as key demographics like gender, age, and racial and ethnic diversity as well. The survey itself was conducted between November 4th and November 20th, 2024. So we've got a lot of great data to share. So we're going to dive right in. This very first section that we're going to cover is around employee expectations of safety. And as we begin unpacking the findings of this year's report, we're going to start with a very critical lens, which is employee expectations. And as we move through this section, we're going to see just how deeply rooted expectations around safety are. So let's jump in. So here's the data on this slide that really sets the stage for us. 96% of employees report that being physically safe at work is important to them. That's nearly universal agreement. And this data point really tells us that safety, it isn't optional, right? It's foundational. We've been doing this research now long enough to know that if employees don't feel safe, nothing else matters, not benefits, not culture, not even compensation. When we get to the next slide, we see that when we asked employees to rank how important certain aspects of their workplace and work life were, physical safety was seen as being extremely important by close to 4 in 5 employees. That was significantly more than any other aspect of work, like their productivity, their company's reputation. So again, really reinforcing what we saw on that previous slide, that everyone, whether it's frontline workers, corporate teams, they value their physical safety at work, and they want to feel that their employer has their back. Now, when we get to the next slide, we see that physical safety is not the only concern. Psychological safety is right there alongside it. Our data shows that the majority of employees consider mental health extremely important as well. And this can include everything from stress levels and emotional well-being to feeling respected and heard. And more employees want to work in an environment where they feel safe speaking up without fear of retaliation, without fear of stigma. And as we see here, it's the younger generations, those who have years left in their careers, who are the most likely to place that critical importance on mental health. So something to really make note of. Peter, I'm going to turn it over to you to share some thoughts on how employers might apply these, early insights that we see here throughout their organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing those, what I would observe as foundational insights to really help set the stage before we start peeling back the onion and getting into some of the details here. But overall, understanding what employees expect from workplace safety is just the first step. To create a safer environment, organizations really need to turn these insights into action. And that's why we're here, not just to give you the stats, but to give you some thoughts of what you can do. So first, safety must be embedded into company culture, not just treated as a compliance requirement, which unfortunately a lot of organizations do. So do what you can to make it a core value in your organization and encourage its adoption company-wide. And this starts at the top with leadership, and then it trickles down. That's a really important point. Second, be sure to regularly remind employees of the mental health resources that are available to them. The current workforce finds psychological safety to be extremely important, as you saw. So make sure they know how to take advantage of any wellness programs, employee assistance programs, things like quiet rooms, or even fitness centers that they might have access to, and other similar benefits. A lot of people just don't know that they're available, and it's not something they've done historically. So then they just don't even think to ask. So you got to kind of do campaigns around that. And then finally, engagement really matters. When leadership actively involves employees in safety conversations and decisions, it really builds trust and awareness and accountability across the organization. So back to you, Danielle.
Fascinating. Thank you, Peter. Our next section is going to explore the gaps that we're seeing between employee expectations around safety and actual safety readiness at work. So some key insights coming your way here. Here's where the disconnect really becomes clear. Even though safety is a top priority for employees, as we saw on the previous slides, many still don't feel completely safe at work. And this slide really visualizes that gap for us. And it's quite a serious one. We see here that about 1 in 4 employees have been experiencing increasing workplace safety fears. They admit that there's something right now about their job that makes them feel afraid. Nearly twice as many flat out don't feel safe at work. So it's no surprise that 51%, that's about half, say that their expectations for safety have increased alongside these feelings in recent years. And one thing is certain coming out of the research: when employees don't feel safe, it impacts everything from focus and productivity to morale and trust. And it often comes down to a lack of preparedness or communication. And we're going to get into this a bit more in the coming slides, especially when those emergencies arise. Now, this stat is really striking. 81% of employees report that they've experienced some type of emergency while they've been at work. Clearly, this is not a limited concern. This is the majority. These experiences are not theoretical. They're lived realities for most of these employees. And what this tells us is that safety planning needs to reflect the actual experiences of the workforce. These emergencies are happening, and employees are certainly paying attention. When we break down the types of emergencies that employees have faced, the variety is certainly notable, as you could see here. Really runs the gamut, and certainly reinforces the idea that organizations need to understand their unique risk profile. They need to start to tailor, if they haven't already, their emergency preparedness accordingly, because clearly employees are really encountering a wide range of scenarios. Now, here's the concern. Despite so many employees having experienced emergencies, 35%, that's more than 1 in 3, don't feel prepared to actually handle one. That's a big gap between exposure and readiness, and an even larger gap when we start to look at this generationally, with the younger generations feeling the least prepared. It suggests to me that current safety programs could be outdated, could be undercommunicated, not taken seriously. Whatever the event, these employees are feeling these feelings of not being safe and not being prepared to handle an emergency situation should it arise. So, Peter, I'm going to turn it over to you again to share some thoughts on how employers might actually help prepare their employees for emergencies.
Yeah, I think by now everyone can see that the research clearly shows that employees don't always feel safe or just prepared to respond to a workplace emergency. But organizations really do have the power to change that. And one of the most effective ways is to simply implement regular, anonymous employee safety perception surveys, which very quickly help you identify gaps in preparedness and give you a direct line of communication to your workers. Best way to do it is to go straight to the source and don't just assume anything. Employers really also should take a proactive approach by enhancing and improving safety trainings, drills, tabletop exercises, things like that, to ensure employees know exactly what to do in a crisis. If you have regular, perhaps fun, and maybe even really engaging safety trainings, any way you can make them engaging is good. It really just makes learning more effective. It encourages participation, and it helps employees feel more confident in handling emergencies. You can even do things like micro trainings where you just walk around and grab two people and say, hey, what would you do if someone was suffering from a heart attack right now? Or fill in the blank, whatever the emergency is. Lasts no more than about 2 or 3 minutes, but it gets people thinking, and they're like, you know what? I need to do something about that. And if it occurs, I need to know what to do. And if you do this, it really creates muscle memory for your workers, which is so important. It allows them to act more quickly when a critical incident occurs. So by taking these steps, organizations really can create a safer, more prepared workforce. Danielle?
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's dive right into our next section. We're going to examine how employees perceive their employer's commitment to safety, and really start to examine where leadership efforts might be falling short. So on our very first slide, we see that according to our data, 1 in 4 employees believe their employer is not doing everything that they could be to keep them safe. Even among those who don't say this outright, they may still be skeptics of this. When we start to look at the numbers a bit more closely, we see that only 1 in 3 employees feel that their employer is what we'd call a safety pioneer or is leading the way in safety. This perception issue is actually quite critical because in safety, perception and reality go hand in hand. If employees don't believe that their employer is actually prioritizing their safety, it's not going to matter how many protocols or tools are in place. That level of distrust and that level of feeling like they are not being cared for, that will be pervasive and will remain. When we get into this next slide, we see this beautiful chart here shows us something really important. The disconnect between what employees value and what they believe their employer values. So looking at the same metrics here. And in every category that was focused on safety, employees consistently rate safety as being more important to them than they think it is to their employer. And that delta there is really what is creating that pervasive sense of distrust that we know exists. And on the next slide, even worse, many employees feel like their organization's safety efforts have actually plateaued. There's a sense that progress overall has basically stalled, right? That maybe safety was a bigger focus during past crises, but has since faded into the background. And this perception creates a sense of being vulnerable, that employees really want to see continued growth and investment, not just a temporary response to maybe a single one-off event. Peter, I'm going to turn it back to you to share some insights once again on how organizations specifically can start to improve employee perceptions of safety efforts.
Absolutely. And I think this one is pretty straightforward. Employees just need to know how they're being protected in order to have a strong perception of workplace safety. So tell them, show them, and then involve them. Transparency matters a lot. Make your safety initiatives visible through things like announcements, signage, emails, put it on TVs and monitors and common spaces, and even verbal reminders. Don't stop doing it. Just always trickle out the message, trickle it out there, and it'll eventually, penetrate the head. You can also consider doing things like forming a safety committee so the employees themselves can take some ownership. It's another way for employees to have a voice in identifying risks and then help shape all your safety improvements. And that involvement is super important. If people feel like they're being forced, something's being forced on them, they're less likely to be involved or feel like they're a part of it and feel like they're safe than if they're actually involved in it. So just think about your culture and your organization and what is the right way to involve people and take feedback. Danielle?
Awesome. Well, thank you for those insights, Peter. Now I would love to discuss the role that stress plays in workplace safety. Stress is a related but often overlooked part of workplace safety. High stress levels don't just affect performance or mental health, they also impact how safe employees feel on the job. In many ways, I would say that stress is that silent safety hazard. And if it's not addressed, it can really erode trust. It could also compound other safety concerns that exist. And this data really confirms that stress is a top contributor to feelings of being unsafe in the workplace. Think of it this way: when people are overworked, unsupported, or even emotionally drained, right? It becomes harder to process information, to respond to emergencies, or to feel secure in general. So reducing stress, it isn't just a wellness initiative, something that's buzzworthy. It really should be treated as a core part of keeping your employees safe. And when we asked what prevents employees from feeling completely safe while working, the answers that we got back were certainly diverse, but also interconnected at the same time. Things like workload pressure or unclear procedures, fear of retaliation, these all bubbled up. These are all factors that tie into stress, that tie into that culture. And fixing them requires looking beyond policies, right? And really starting to examine how people are actually experiencing work on a day to day basis. Um, Another common stressor that employees face is safety reporting. Again, this is going hand in hand. And as we see here, many organizations are encouraging safety reporting, which is certainly, a step in the right direction. And in theory, when employees are invited to speak up about the hazards or concerns that they might be seeing in the workplace, it creates a more proactive safety culture. About 4 in 5 employees also reported to us that communication from their employer around the process has also been well communicated and is something that they feel prepared for. But as we'll see on the next slide, this encouragement alone doesn't always result in the right positive action that we want to be seeing. Despite that encouragement that employees say they are getting from their employer, so many still have concerns about reporting the safety issues they might be seeing. 1 in 3 aren't comfortable reporting safety issues. 2 in 5 reported to us that they've already experienced some form of retaliation for safety reporting in the past. And 1 in 3 are worried that they're just not going to be taken seriously if they speak up. These concerns can really silence important feedback, right? And it makes it harder to identify and fix real issues. So if the process doesn't feel safe, employees, they're just not going to use it. Um, and on this next slide, we can actually start to see the real cost of these concerns. Again, this is not something that is just theoretical. There is a very big reaction to what we are seeing. There's consequences. When employees are uncomfortable reporting safety issues, it has the potential to undermine the entire system. It stalls progress. It creates an environment where risks potentially are going unaddressed. And even more detrimental, it erodes that trust and starts to impact your employee engagement in a very big way. As we see here, 45% say they're not feeling completely engaged at work. 47% say they don't completely trust their employer when those feelings are obviously there. Peter, why don't you walk us through some ways that organizations can really take these insights and help reduce workplace stress for their employees?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Danielle mentioned, when employees feel safer, they are less stressed and then more likely to stay focused and engaged. And that's good for business, not just good for the employee, but also good for business. So, always remember that when you're talking to executives and trying to get funding and time for things like this. Good for the employee, but good for business. So, here are just a couple recommendations for reducing employee stress, which will create a happier, safer, and more productive workforce. First, just reevaluate your reporting processes. If employees are feeling fearful to report safety concerns and near misses, your reporting process needs improvement. So consider some kind of reporting system that is anonymous and or unretaliatory. That's really important. The focus should always be on the problem, not the person. Very important to remember. And it seems so simple when you say it, but you have to make that a cultural thing. It's about the problem, not the person. Humans are just going to make mistakes. You have to admit that. Then you want to make sure that you're investigating and then following through on all the safety concerns that are reported. Just be sure to create an action plan to actually resolve those issues. And then, very importantly, communicate them company-wide. Let employees know when and how the issue was resolved. Closure is actually a very important part of the process psychologically for humans. Humans need closure. And then finally, think about ways to reward and maybe even celebrate safety achievements. What this does is create positivity and perhaps even a little healthy competition with safety. And sometimes that competitive factor can drive people to do things they otherwise would not. So these are just a few ways you can alleviate employee stress and anxiety when it comes to workplace safety. Now, I want to cover a few additional ways that you can apply these insights. So when organizations increase safety efforts, they really do see clear benefits. As you can see here on this slide with these two data points, employees who believe their employer has made more of an effort to ensure their safety over the past year, they're more likely to feel physically, mentally, and psychologically safe at work compared to those who think their organization's efforts were reduced or remain the same. So employees are also 40% more likely to completely trust their employer when they see increased organizational safety efforts. Now, when asked what employees need to feel safe and supported, clear instructions, timely updates, and follow-up information ranked as top priorities. That's why I said what I did earlier on that other slide. It's all so important, that communication and timeliness. The next time a safety issue arises at your organization, be sure to communicate clear instructions to your employees on the steps they should take during the situation. Then be sure to provide your employees with timely updates as you gain more information. You can't predict everything ahead of time. You've got to observe what's going on and then call audibles and communicate that out. And as we learned today, employees absolutely value that transparency. It will increase the trust bond. And then finally, don't forget to follow up with additional information or even action items, if it makes sense based on the situation, after the safety incident has actually resolved itself. Keeping your employees informed throughout the process and afterward will really help them feel safe and supported. Ultimately, when your workforce feels safe, your organization will thrive, as I indicated earlier. The graph on the left shows the correlation between employee safety and employer trust. And as you can see, employees who feel completely safe at work are much more likely to trust their employers. It's a similar result with employee engagement, as you can see on the graph on the right. Fostering a workplace where employees feel secure and supported and valued really contributes to a more resilient organization overall. So, if you remember nothing else from today's presentation, just remember these key takeaways here. First, be sure to break down reporting barriers. I think that one's huge. Provide anonymous, easy-to-use channels for reporting safety concerns without fear of retaliation. It's kind of a 1-2 punch there. Easy reporting, no retaliation. Encourage it. A culture of open communication really allows organizations to address any of these risks proactively. Next, you want to integrate mental health support. And you saw how the younger generation really values that. So make mental well-being a core part of workplace safety by offering counseling, stress management, training, employee assistance programs, all those things. Continue to remind people that you take mental health seriously, and there's all these things that they can take advantage of. Third, you want to incorporate employee feedback. actively involve employees in safety initiatives through things like audits, trainings, surveys, and debriefs afterward. Their insights really create practical trust-building solutions. And then fourth, ensure very clear and very timely communication. So use strategic communication tools to deliver critical updates efficiently before, during, and after emergencies. And then it'll keep employees informed without any kind of unnecessary distractions. And then lastly, overall, just foster a culture of safety and transparency. Encourage accountability at all levels of the organization. It can't be something that the people on the bottom feel like is being forced on them. It's got to be from the top down. And you got to celebrate safety milestones. And then again, lead by example to build that long-term trust and commitment. And if you can take these steps, it'll really help your organization align with employee expectations, as you've seen in the data. It'll help you strengthen trust and create a safer, more resilient workspace overall. So I hope you've all gained actionable insights on employee perceptions of safety based on all the material we presented today. I always say, don't shoot the messenger. We're just reporting the data based on what we found, but I think it's really insightful to help you think about how you can do things differently in your organization. And having the right strategies in place is just, I think, essential, but organizations also need the right tools to help them execute those effectively. And that's where AlertMedia can help you. Our software helps you keep your people safe, informed, and connected, no matter where they live, work, or travel. Generally speaking, to deliver the highest level of safety and to achieve better outcomes when bad things happen, the more you can compress the cycle between incident awareness to actually taking action on it, the better outcome that you'll experience. And that's precisely what we do. Through a combination of people and technology, we're constantly monitoring the world for anything that can impact employee safety or business continuity, and then quickly alerting our customers to what's going on and which of their people, very importantly, or which of their assets are actually in harm's way, so then they can take quick action. And then we combine that with a global mass communication capability, so our customers can quickly reach any employee anywhere in the world on multiple channels with helpful information, and then even enable those recipients to respond back in real time, sharing helpful information with you or empowering them to ask questions. That two-way communication is so critical during safety, security, resiliency events. So just think of our software and our team as a tremendous force multiplier for you and your organization, helping you keep your people safe, informed, and connected, again, no matter where they live, work, or travel. So that's all I had to say. Katie, I'll turn it over back to you. I saw there were tons of questions and things like that coming in. I think we'll get to here shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to go ahead and launch a poll first, though. So you just heard from Peter and a little bit about what AlertMedia does, how we kind of lead the industry in employee safety. But if you want to learn even more, I just wanted to launch this poll now so you can let us know. You could say yes, and we will happily, get you the information you need. We'll have a chat, and then you can also say no, not right now. No hard feelings. You guys know where to find us when you need us. So no hard feelings, like I said. So while I'm waiting for you guys to get your answers in, go ahead and think of an amazing question for Peter or Danielle, because that's what we're getting to next. And with that, as Peter said, we're getting a lot of really great ones. So let's go ahead and get into it. Okay. Danielle, I'm going to start with you. So a lot of people are feeling like that data set saying that their employers prioritize productivity and reputation over safety. That feels really big to a lot of folks. So have you seen any shifts in that perception year over year? I know we've done this report. I think this is our third annual. So how is that sort of trending?
Yeah, so the research reveals that employees continue to believe to a fairly large degree that their employer prioritizes productivity, reputation over safety. These sentiments have remained relatively unchanged since we first started fielding this research, as you said, about 3 years ago. So it seems to be sort of a continuing thread that feeling that their employer is not prioritizing their safety to the same degree that they prioritize it. That is something that we've been seeing consistently year over year for the last 3 years.
Excellent. And someone had a question here. Do you ask the respondents which company they work for?
We don't. So this is anonymous to that degree for personal safety reasons. We just know basic demographic information beyond, gender, age, geographic region. We also look at how large of a company they work for, how many employees work in that company. We ask if they're at a manager level versus a non-manager. So there are definitely layers of information that we pull out that will help us when we, get into the analysis. But we don't go as specific as asking company information. We just worry that folks might not be as willing to share some real perceptions and real feelings with us if they have to give us the name of their employer. So no.
Very good. No, that makes a lot of sense. Peter, I'm going to transition over to you now because it's advice time. Someone is mentioning just they're noticing a lot more apathy in the workplace lately when it comes to safety. And this person is doing all they can. They brought in some company-sponsored CPR trainings, AED trainings, first aid, that sort of thing. But the results are very, very mixed. So do you have any tips for overcoming the apathy that exists to sort of help, support that safety culture we've been talking about?
Yeah, I would say two things really come to mind. One is to try to make it personal. If you can find someone in the organization that's willing to share a very heart-touching story about how either they didn't have the right training and then there was a negative outcome, which is really sad, but sometimes that can be helpful, or how they did have the right training and they made a difference in an outcome. That's probably a preferable thing to do. Because if people see someone nearby them who they know, or is at least part of the company, has done that, it kind of perks people up and it becomes this less theoretical thing and more of a real thing. So sharing stories like that can be really beneficial. The other thing that's just incredibly powerful is to get the highest levels in your organization at the executive level to participate. If you're doing a CPR training, what better way than to have the CEO stand up and she bends over and starts performing the CPR on the dummy? I mean, that shows there's absolute commitment from the top. There's all sorts of other things you can do too, but those are really, really powerful things.
Absolutely. And then you had mentioned at one point rewarding safety efforts. Do you have any thoughts or suggestions on what that reward could be, or how to incentivize employees in that way?
Yeah, I think it's part of a kind of a published safety program. Almost think of it like a bounty program. Computer programmers are paid a bounty if they can find a bug, if people report a safety issue, or do something that really contributes to the overall program. Say that, here's like a company prize store where you can go get something and pick it out of the store, or you can give gift certificates. It doesn't have to be big. It could be like $10 or $5 to Starbucks or something like that. But just something to show that the company cares about this and is investing in it. And you don't want to make it look like it's a belittling process or anything. It's more like, no, we really value it. We want to make sure that we reward accordingly. So you don't have to give away like $1,000 bonuses or anything, just something to recognize that people are willing to step up, mention something, and you want to recognize that they were willing to do that.
And I actually really love that, Peter. If I could jump in as well, I think it goes hand in hand with what we talked about around fear of retaliation. This is obviously doing the exact opposite, right? It's telling employees, hey, if you do speak up, we're going to reward you versus the repercussions that some might feel could come if they do speak up. So I actually really love that example. And I think it will go a long way in sort of quelling those fears of having retaliation for raising a hand.
And it goes back to what I said before, which is you're focusing on the problem, not the person. You always have to remember and make sure everyone in the organization, from executives down, realize that we're all humans. Nobody is perfect. everyone will make a mistake at some point or another. So let's try to identify what are the problems that can pop up and the behaviors that lead to them. They're not people necessarily, it's the problem. And then we can start to correct behaviors to reduce those problems. So anything you do to encourage people to put the shining light on the problem itself, it kind of takes it away from the person.
Mhm. You know what, Peter, that reminds me of a guest that you had on the Employee Safety podcast that talked about celebrating near misses. And
Yes.
some organizations, they see that as a bad thing. Oh, too many near misses, that's a negative metric. But this organization has said, hey, we saw it, we did something about it, and now we have what we need to fix it. So would you say
That's
that
right.
applies here as well?
100%, 100%. Yep. It's that culture of safety. And if you have a culture of safety, you don't ignore it. You don't stick your head in the ground like an ostrich and just say, oh, I'm not seeing anything going on around me. You literally acknowledge everything that could potentially be a problem, and then you fix it. Think of it as like, is it the Japanese art of Kaizen, where you just do little incremental improvements over time until you have perfection or close to it.
Such a philosopher, Peter. Danielle, I'm going to go back to you for a moment. Do you remember COVID-19? I bet you do. Someone's asking if that really changed things. This is an opinion question, Danielle, with you being in this line of work. Do you think that really changed things in terms of employee safety, of how, quickly things can change, or how quickly you might have to change your work environment from work to home, something like that? Do you think that has a big impact on employee safety?
For sure. And I remember back to when we first started doing this particular survey. It was, soon after there was a return to office in many places, and we asked more pointed questions around just the impact of COVID. I would say even 5+ years out from the onset of COVID. And this is seen across work that I do across industry and for other clients. There was a culture of safety that was certainly changed. And I would say that has impacted the way employees not only show up for work, but it has certainly impacted their expectations around safety, their demands around safety, and also their fears around safety. For many of us who lived through that, that was probably the biggest change to the way that we worked for many of us across our entire career. So that's something that we don't necessarily lose sight of. You might be back at work, you might be back to an office, but those are things that I feel from the work that we've done will have a long-term impact on employee expectations for safety, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask both of you this question. Let me start with you first, Peter. One of our attendees today is on a wellness team within their organization. And it's Mental Health Awareness Month right now, being in May. And this is the first time that the wellness team has been asked to team up with safety to do a few demonstrations and trainings and that sort of thing. So, Peter, do you think that wellness should fall under the umbrella of safety within an organization?
It depends on the organization and the culture, but broadly speaking, yes, because we talk about it in the way we presented the data and the way we did our analysis here. But safety is not just physical; it's also mental. And then wellness can span both of those. It could be a physical problem, it could be a mental problem, but ultimately it all comes down to, is the person safe and whole and able to bring their entire self to work to be maximally productive? And to me, that all falls under safety. That's my opinion. And again, it could vary by organization. Danielle, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I definitely agree with you. Again, in my line of work, when we've worked with other companies, we've done research into looking at wellness as an employee benefit, right? As like a perk. And I think for a long time, it falls victim to sort of the buzzword of, oh, employee wellness programs. It's seen as this sort of glamorous perk, added benefit. But having done research like this, where we actually start to see the long range impact and the long term impact of things like stress and worries, for me, it feels like we can no longer treat wellness as an employee benefit. It has to be treated as just a natural part of the overall employee culture, which in my mind, just like you said, Peter, ties directly into safety.
I think it helps too to think of an employee like the holistic employee, right? And that's everything: psychological safety, physical safety. And someone here just said, supporting mental health in a corporation isn't just a nice to have; it's an essential. So I think that's a really good way of putting it. Also, I wanted to mention that person that mentioned wellness versus safety says that, or points out a really good point, that sleep is a big part of mental health and productivity. So organizations could be helping to promote great sleep within their organizations as well. So thought that was an interesting point.
That's great.
All right. Danielle, when you think about, well, I'll just read it exactly. How do you think managers that within safety right now can go beyond that and become a stronger safety leader? I know there were some things in the survey that were specifically for managers versus non-managers, but did you see any sort of tie there about how they can take more of a leadership approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think it also goes back to what Peter was saying earlier as well. It has to go from the top down. We have to model the sort of behavior that we want to see. We don't want to make the non-managers or the entry level or the lower man on the totem pole feel like it's something they're being forced to do when everybody else who's above them is not required to do the same. So for me, it really comes down to modeling that behavior. And there's ways that that could happen. I mean, depending on the organization, the size, the industry, it could be something as simple as, monthly safety check-ins that a manager is leading and reinforcing company policy, reinforcing folks to speak up, to report, to raise a hand. It could be something even more formal, but again, it really needs to come from the top down, is really the way that you're going to get that breakthrough and really allow the majority of employees who sit outside of leadership feel like their leaders are taking an active role in their safety.
I'll just make a quick comment on that, Katie, if you don't mind. And it's not related to safety in general, but the importance of having executives at the top show that they're really bought in. This is many years ago. I was a teenager working in a restaurant, and it was for a chain that had maybe 50 or so restaurants. So not huge, but not small. They hired a new CFO, and they required every executive that came into the organization to go through every job at the restaurant. So here's the CFO. At the time, I was a kid, and he was in his late 50s. He had to start as a busboy for 2 days, literally as a busboy, working exactly like a busboy. And then after that, he moved up to the next job, working through waiter, bartender, short order cook. I mean, everything. And that just made me believe that this company really, their executives really understood what it was like for the people in the field to do their jobs. And I knew they had our backs. Same thing when it comes to safety. So anytime you can do stuff like that, it's incredibly powerful.
Perfect. Well, Peter, I'm going to stick with you for a minute. We are approaching extreme heat season. Do you have any specifics for that? Regulations aside, right? How seriously should employers be taking safety surrounding that, and how should they communicate those efforts to their employees?
Well, as someone who has personally suffered from it, not while I was working for a company, but at home and doing work in the backyard and almost getting heat stroke, I can just tell you, it is something you have to take very seriously. We've done a few different podcasts on this. We've had guests come on and talk about it. So I encourage you to go listen to the Employee Safety Podcast, find those episodes. But it's something you should absolutely take seriously. Talk to people, look at the weather forecast. It's so important. Like here in Austin, Texas right now, and across Texas in general, we're having a very weird early summer, late spring heat wave where the temperatures are suddenly going from, a nice 60 to 80 degrees to suddenly over 100. So people aren't always thinking about, they're so used to it being cooler, and then suddenly it's hot. They forget that can be so draining. So you should absolutely be monitoring out in the future and then warning people about the changes. It takes time. It can take weeks or months for the body to acclimate, especially if you're working in outside roles. So make sure that you take it all very seriously and communicate it to your employees.
Danielle, that might be something to think about for future years, right? Like what is the climate and geography of where these people are located? And does that bring additional safety concerns?
I love that.
Noted. Great. All right. I think we have time for one more question. Let me see here. Peter, what do you think are the telltale signs or warning signs that a safety culture could use some improvement, or that the employees just might not be feeling particularly safe or have a great perception of the employer's safety efforts? What are the signs?
I think the biggest sign is you just start having a lot of issues. Safety not reports, but just incidents go up tremendously. And then just watch the numbers. If you see a lot of accidents happening, you're like, why did that happen? That just seems so silly. That's when you've got a disengaged group of people, and that you got to just start to jump in and do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and actually we have a comment that sort of relates to that just came in. It's this person is saying they did a return to office earlier this year and found that people are getting upset by kind of the common things like swiping their badges and not piggybacking off of someone else's swipe. So I feel like maybe that could be a good indicator too, when just sort of the smaller protocols and procedures aren't necessarily being followed. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it kind of goes in line with what I was saying. It's just across the board, you're seeing more non-compliance. Non-compliance meaning a safety incident happens, and I would call someone tagging in on someone else's badge swipe a safety incident. Like that could, cause real trouble. And it's important to just go out and start re-educating, explain the why behind it. Make sure that everyone knows, everyone from the top down, like, the high level executives get no special treatment. They have to, swipe in just like everyone else and swipe out just like everyone else. And it's time to just kind of stop and having some of those conversations, put out some surveys, ask why people aren't doing these things, see what's wrong, and then taking action on that feedback that you're getting.
Excellent. Well, we are going to move on here, but I wanted to tell you all of you attendees, I think you just won the award for most engaged audience, because we have so many questions coming in that we are not able to answer. So don't worry, I'm going to give you a way to continue that conversation here in just a moment. But first, I wanted to just give you a really quick and easy way to access the Employee Safety Report for 2025 right now. So if you do have your phone handy, you can go ahead and snap this QR code, and that'll take you right to it. And if you want to look for it at a later time, you can just go to alertmedia.com and find it there as well. And then, as promised, here are email addresses for Danielle and Peter. Please, again, as they said before, don't shoot the messenger. These are just really responses. But really, really thanks for all of these great questions, great engagement, and also just comments, right? A lot of folks, Danielle and Peter, left just some personal anecdotes here that I would love for y'all to go through later and just read it. So thank you, Danielle. You just have a wonderful way of, delivering this data in layperson's terms that everyone can understand. So thank you.
Well, thank you for those kind words. And as always, thank you for having me. This is something I look forward to every year. The results are fascinating. The implications of the research are amazing. There's so much that could be done. So if I can help in any way to any of the attendees, as Katie mentioned, my information is here. I look forward to hearing from you. But thank you again for tuning in today.
Of course. And Peter, thank
And on
you.
behalf of
If you want to do you have any final thoughts for us before we sign off?
No, just thank you very much for the opportunity to present. I'm really passionate about keeping people safe, but I'm also passionate about making organizations as productive as possible. And ultimately, organizations are just agglomerations of people. And the more of them that feel safe and secure and mentally good, the more productive they're going to be for you. So it's a win-win all over the place.
Absolutely. Well, I just wanted to reiterate that the data we presented here was just the tip of the iceberg. The report is just chock full of more information that I think you'll really enjoy. So thank you all for coming and for spending part of your day with us. As I said, your engagement was just fantastic. We would love to see you at a future Alert Media webinar. And of course, I just want to thank EHS Today for being such an amazing partner.